insulted him, they beat him, they broke his nose.
He just couldn't understand that he had done nothing wrong but be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So Riley likes to get up really early, and the first thing that he likes to do after he's done all of his daily living skills, getting showered and shaved and out of the house, he likes to get out probably about 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and what he does is he walks around town, and that's his way of kind of calming his demeanor and his self down. He really needs to take those walks to just kind of set his day in motion.
If you have ever spent any time in North Eugene, chances are you've seen Riley. The sidewalks of Coburg Road are his home. Here, Riley walks, relaxes, and processes the world around him.
Riley was a joy to have. He was this incredibly beautiful child. He had all these beautiful curly locks on his head. Everyone just admired and adored him because he was a pretty cute kid. As he began to grow a little bit, I noticed that there was probably some kind of difficulty that was happening and challenges in his life. And so it wasn't until he was about 4 years old that I realized that he was probably going to need a little bit of extra help in his life. He didn't hit any of the milestones that a kid would as they were going through the developmental stages. And he absolutely wanted to just always be held and cuddled, kind of like a young child, like a young baby, on into his later toddler years. He was a really happy, smiley kid and spent a lot of time just focusing on certain toys that he really liked. And so when he was with those toys and the things that he really enjoyed being surrounded by, he would just giggle and just had such a happy demeanor all the time.
As Riley grew older, his favorite toy became his VCR.
Works every time, maestro.
Watching movies, studying movies, logging tiny details about movies. In time, he grew into a walking encyclopedia for movies. And his knowledge base served him well, landing him a job at a small neighborhood video store. He was the guy who could answer any question about any movie, no matter how obscure. The store has closed since then, but Riley's love for movies has not. In fact, it has evolved.
He's also working on making movies.
I had to walk out the gate in the airport. I saw it in the airport, go to the bathroom, pick up your luggage, go to the bathroom again, and get in the car and drive home.
It's called the Riley movie. It's about Riley's life. It's kind of the day in the life of Riley, and so he wanted to have a camera and he wanted to learn how to make movies, and so it was his first experience with just taking the camera and capturing things of interest to him.
But he didn't stop there.
And they're now working on a Riley version of Beetlejuice.
Yeah,
He likes to work on it and then watch it and then edit it and practice the lines and then re-practice the lines and then play the lines out.
I know what you two are up to and you're not going to get away with it.
Making these films, watching films, taking his walks around town, these are the most important elements of Riley's life. This is what brings him joy. This is what makes him comfortable. This is the life Riley wants, the life he designed for himself.
I'm just amazed every day at how much more independence he seeks in his life. He will raise the bar for himself, which has been quite amazing. So he wants to try something new, and then he'll talk about it, and he'll present the idea to me or, to people that he feels trust in, and then he will just work at that until he find success. He's been very successful, I think, especially in living independently. He understands his disability, and he understands the way that it affects him in his life. And so that, I think, has been a great advantage for Riley, is to know where his challenges are and then to figure out how to work around those challenges. It was his 30th birthday party, and he was with a group of friends earlier in the evening, and so they got together to share some birthday cake and just kind of hang out, play some games, had a great time. He had gone back to his apartment, and he had written some letters to his grandma to tell her about the party and what had transpired that day. And he had gone to mail the letters, and so it was at a nice little shopping mall near where he lives. And at that point, it was quite late in the evening at that point. It was around 9:30 at night, and he had left the mailbox to head back towards his apartment, and 3 young men followed him back into a very secluded area where they proceeded to assault and beat him up. One of them proceeded to grab him and punch him in the face, and then punched him several times, which then threw him back against a chain link fence. They grabbed him at that point, all 3 of them, threw him on the ground and proceeded to punch and kick and beat him. One of the young men actually proceeded to choke him while yelling at the others to try and find his money and get his money. And when they discovered that he didn't have any money, then they just proceeded to continue to beat him and then finally fled the scene.
After the assault, Riley picked himself up. He made his way home, wondering what he did wrong. What did he do to deserve such a violent attack? All night long, Riley sat in his home, beaten, confused, alone with these thoughts.
I had called Riley early that day to remind him about an appointment that we had later in the day. And that's when he told me that he had been beat up. When it all came out, the reason he had not called me to tell me what had happened was, as I taught him phone manners, I taught him that it wasn't appropriate to call people before 9 in the morning and after 9 at night. And so he was waiting for 9 o'clock so that he could call. When he answered the door, it was a feeling that as a mother, I never want to have to experience again. His face was all bruised and swollen. He still had blood all over from being beaten up. He was so distraught and scared and worried and consumed with that he thought he had done something wrong, and he just could not figure out what he had done wrong for these people to assault him like this.
Riley's nose was broken. He had a busted eardrum and bruising all over his torso. After visiting the hospital, Riley and his mom went straight to the Eugene Police Department.
We're going to be driving up here on the scene of the where the assault occurred. Here you're going to see the shopping center, the Safeway store.
Eugene policeman Darwin Terry investigated the assault.
Basically, they took this route. Riley was walking here on the sidewalk underneath the overhang here in front of these businesses, and unknown to him, he was being followed by 3 guys. You'll see it's fairly open here, but with the trees, there's no lighting out here whatsoever. Over here, Riley started walking on the sidewalk, and this is where they assaulted him right here.
Right here is a courtyard on the back side of the Coburg Road Shopping Center, out of the view from traffic and pedestrians. Soon, Officer Terry would learn there were no security cameras in the courtyard and no apparent witnesses other than Riley himself.
He was able to tell me where it took place, describe the location, and he had a very vague description of the suspects. He did tell me there was 3 of them, and They were younger males. He was able to tell me that, and he had just a very brief description of their clothing. So my thought was, because Riley told me they were late teens, early 20s, that possibly it could be high school students. And the reason I say that is because this strip mall, Safeway, is close to Sheldon High School.
So Officer Terry got the word out around Sheldon High School. Within a few days, he caught wind that a student was bragging about beating up a guy named Riley. It wasn't long before the policeman had a name.
To suggest that this was going to be an easy case going in to prove it, whether at grand jury or later at trial, would be a gross overstatement of the strength of our case. We had goals going in. Some of the goals were to try and get Riley to identify who the three individuals were.
Riley's role in identifying the suspects was pivotal. 6 photos laid out on a page. One of the 6 was the first suspect police had tracked down.
It was something pretty special. I wasn't sure how it was going to go. I showed Riley the photo lineup. He looked down at the pictures, and he started counting and pointing. Eventually, I asked him why he was counting all the 6 suspects, or 6 people that were on the photo lineup. And he told me that there wasn't 6 people that beat him up. So what I did is I re-explained to Riley the process of the photo lineup, that only one person may or may not be in the photo lineup who assaulted him. And so after I did that, he within seconds picked out the person who eventually came to be known as the suspect, Johnny Norsing. So I really was highly impressed with that.
Once Riley ID'd the juvenile suspect, the investigation led to 2 more arrests. As Officer Terry interviewed all 3 suspects, one ugly fact of the case emerged. The boys deliberately targeted Riley because of his developmental disability.
We have a thing called bias crime. Anytime someone is assaulted for because of their race, their color, or they have a disability, it's considered a bias crime. If that's the sole purpose that they were assaulted for, it upgrades it to a felony, an assault 3, which is a felony.
Riley's role in the next phase of the judicial process was also extremely important.
We wanted him to just tell his story. Tell us what you remember of these events. He had given some very powerful testimony as to what had happened to him that day and who the assailants, who these attackers were. And in looking at this grand jury, they were really taken by Riley. It just doesn't take you very long to be with him before you see a lot of good in this kid and a lot of strength, really. We needed an identification from Riley. We needed him to be able to explain how his nose was broken and how they got him away from the public, away from security cameras, away from where anybody else would have seen this event happen. And he did a very good job at explaining how that all came to be and identifying these 3 men as his attackers. We wanted to impose a prison sentence that was stiff enough that they got the message that this is not going to be tolerated, and we wanted to make sure their criminal record reflected that they had 2 prior person felonies.
I feel bad for the parents of the young men because they also lost their kids for a long time. But as far as I'm concerned, they should have served a lot longer.
On the day of sentencing, Riley stepped forward one final time.
He was very poignantly able to tell them exactly how he felt about what they did.
Did to me, it made me really scared. Yep, very bad at broke my nose. beat me up. It's on my birthday. I didn't do anything wrong. I deserve to be treated nice in the world. Me on the ground and against the fence, the fence, out here outside and against the fence, punched me in the face, kicked me in the face, in the head, like this, in the face like this, yeah, like this in the head. To hear you back, you're really mean, you're really mean, I don't like what you did to me, and I'm glad that you're going to jail.
This case is now closed, but for Officer Darwin Terry and others, the bigger issue remains unresolved.
It throws it to another level when somebody's taken advantage of, who has a disability, who is basically almost defenseless against an attack like he suffered. Hopefully these suspects were rehabilitated or understand the severity of what they did, including and mostly the insensitivity to life and to Riley and his disability, what they did. To me, that's pretty cowardly for what they did. And so hopefully there was some type of rehabilitation during prison time or during their time in prison that they got to really reflect back and look upon that.
Riley is back in his neighborhood, walking, processing the world, but not just watching movies. Now he's creating them.
There's something in this book this morning.
He's getting back to his rambunctious self. You will now see Riley all over town.
Riley has endured. It hasn't been easy. For more than a year after the assault, Riley sat in his apartment filled with fear. But after extensive counseling, after the legal process brought Riley some justice, combined with the love and support of many people, Riley is back.
As far as feeling resolve, I think that he does feel resolve. Does he verbalize that to me? Not in the words like I feel resolve, but I definitely see it in his actions, and I see it in the way that he is branching his life out again.